Welcome back to the Stateless Standard, where we light the torch of truth to expose the shadows of power. I'm your digital guide through the murky underbelly of history, and today we're diving deeper into the Laurel Canyon saga. If you've been following along, you know this isn't just a nostalgic trip down memory lane. It's a dissection of how the so-called counterculture was engineered, manipulated, and weaponized by the very establishment it pretended to rebel against. Today we turn our gaze towards the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Tests, Ken Kesey, the Merry Pranksters, and their house band, the Grateful Dead. You're gonna want your seatbelt on for this ride through history, because this ain't your grandma's hippie folklore. This is a tale of the CIA, domestic psychological operations, elite bloodlines, and how LSD became the perfect tool for social control. Let's start at the source. 1965. Ken Kesey, the celebrated author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, loads up a tie-dyed school bus with a ragtag crew of misfits and enough LSD to fry the minds of a small nation. They call themselves the Merry Pranksters, and their mission? To crisscross America, hosting acid tests where anyone brave or foolish enough could drop a tab and expand their consciousness. Sounds like pure, unadulterated freedom, right? A grassroots rebellion against the buttoned-up squares of the establishment. But hold on to your skepticism, because this whole spectacle has the fingerprints of Uncle Sam all over it. You see, Kesey's psychedelic odyssey didn't spring from some divine inspiration. It was birthed in the sterile labs of the CIA's MKULTRA program. For those new to this rabbit hole, MKULTRA was the agency's infamous mind control project, where they dosed unsuspecting Americans, students, prisoners, even their own agents, with LSD and other hallucinogens, to see if they could bend reality, shatter psyches, and engineer obedience. Kesey volunteered for these experiments at a VA hospital in Menlo Park, California, back in 1959. He got paid to trip balls under the watchful eyes of government shrinks. And what did he do with this enlightenment? He decided to share it with the world, turning private CIA trials into public spectacles. Coincidence? Or was Kesey the perfect vector for disseminating a drug that could pacify a generation of potential revolutionaries? The pranksters weren't just any band of hippies. They included beatnik icons like Neal Cassady, the real-life inspiration for Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and poet Allen Ginsberg, whose howls against the machine conveniently aligned with the era's controlled chaos. Their bus, dubbed Further, became a rolling laboratory for acid-fueled mayhem. And documenting it all? Tom Wolfe, the sharp-dressed journalist who turned their antics into the bestseller, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Wolfe painted them as merry rebels, but let's be real, this was cultural engineering at its finest. The acid tests weren't about liberation. They were beta tests for mass mind alteration, turning youthful energy into aimless hedonism while the state consolidated power. Now enter the soundtrack to this Psyop, the Grateful Dead, then known as the Warlocks. These guys weren't just Kesey's house band. They were integral to the acid tests, providing the sonic wallpaper for thousands of melted minds. But peel back the layers, and you'll find connections that scream establishment insider, louder than a Jerry Garcia solo. The Dead's rise coincided perfectly with the explosion of LSD in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district, ground zero for the hippie movement. And who was flooding the streets with that acid? None other than Augustus Owsley Stanley III, the band's sound engineer and the undisputed king of underground LSD production. Owsley, or Bear as he was known, cooked up millions of tabs in the mid-60s, distributing them for free at events like the Human Being in January 1967, 10,000 tabs, and the Monterey Pop Festival, 14,000 more. Even at Altamont, the infamous 1969 concert that turned deadly, Owsley was there, handing out acid like candy at a parade. Brotherly love? Sure, if your idea of altruism involves a street value of $20,000–$30,000 per batch in 1960s dollars. Owsley wasn't in it for the money, they say. He was a wizard alchemist with priestly and magical intentions, according to historians Martin Lee and Bruce Schlain in Acid Dreams. But let's apply some libertarian scrutiny here. Who bankrolls a guy giving away fortunes in drugs, and why does his background read like a roster of state power players? Owsley Stanley III was no street urchin. His father, Augustus Owsley Stanley II, was a World War II naval officer on the USS Lexington and later a government attorney in Washington, D.C. Raised in Arlington, Virginia, the belly of the beast, young Owsley attended the elite Charlotte Hall Military Academy until he got booted for boozing in 9th grade. At 15, he voluntarily checked into St. Elizabeth's Hospital, formerly the Government Hospital for the Insane, for a 15-month treatment stint. Coincidentally, his mother died during this time, another tragic thread in the Laurel Canyon tapestry. By 18, he dropped out of school but somehow waltzed into the University of Virginia. Then, at 21, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force as an electronics specialist in radio intelligence and radar, skills that would later revolutionize live sound for rock concerts. After the military, he popped up at Pasadena's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a NASA hotspot teeming with spooks. In 1963, he relocated to Berkeley, the epicenter of anti-war fervor, where he allegedly swiped an LSD recipe from the university library. His first lab bust? February 1965, for running a meth operation. Berkeley was swimming in speed, much of it Owsley's doing. But with a lawyer who doubled as the city's vice mayor, he walked free and even sued to get his gear back. Smooth, right? He then cranked out 4 million tabs of LSD, fueling the counterculture explosion. In early 1965, Owsley and the Dead decamped to Watts, LA, right next to a brothel, echoing the seedy setups of CIA acid ops. They ran tests there until April, just months before Watts erupted in riots that killed 34. Coincidence? Or social experimentation in action? Owsley's innovations didn't stop at drugs. As the Dead's sound wizard, he pioneered systems that turned concerts into immersive psyops, drawing on his military radar training to manipulate crowds through audio. And in 1967, he unleashed STP, a nasty hallucinogen from Dow Chemical, tested at Edgewood Arsenal for biowarfare. Recipe courtesy of Alexander Shulgin, Navy vet turned Dow chemist and DEA collaborator. The acid tests themselves? Masterclasses in controlled chaos. Kesey, fresh from his CIA-funded trips at Stanford, hosted these bashes blending music, lights, and free LSD. The Dead provided the jam sessions, Owsley the chemicals. But was this pure rebellion? Or a covert lab for studying group dynamics, emotional manipulation, and how to derail genuine dissent? Dig deeper, and the web tightens. Courtney Love's dad, Hank Harrison, was the Dead's early road manager. He hints at unseen forces boosting the band's rise, sophisticated tours and events beyond grassroots means. Haight-Ashbury teamed with shrinks and researchers tied to MKULTRA, using communes and festivals as petri dishes. So were the Grateful Dead feds? Not outright, perhaps, but unwitting or witting pawns in a grand scheme. Their music symbolized freedom, but it herded youth into drugged complacency while the state waged wars abroad and tightened grips at home. The counterculture wasn't a threat, it was a safety valve, engineered by elites to dissipate revolutionary steam. Think about it. LSD promised enlightenment, but delivered distraction. The Dead's endless jams mirrored the era's aimless vibe. Beautiful, sure, but ultimately harmless to power structures. From Owsley's blue blood lineage to Kesey's agency ties, this wasn't organic. It was status sleight of hand, turning rebels into consumers of their own illusions. We've still only scratched the surface, but remember, true liberty comes from seeing through the haze. If this lit your fire, like, subscribe, and share the torch. Drop your thoughts below. Were the Dead dupes or deep state darlings? Until next time, stay vigilant. This is the Stateless Standard, signing off.